Welcome to Mission Evolution Radio Show with Gwilda Wiyaka, bringing together today's leading experts to uncover ever-deepening spiritual truths and the latest scientific developments in support of the evolution of humankind. For more information on Mission Evolution Radio with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit www.missionevolution.org. And now, here's the host of Mission Evolution, Miss Gwilda Wiyaka.
Hello. Thanks for joining us on Mission Evolution. We're coming to you on X-Zone TV and Simul TV from our broadcast studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada, bringing the latest evolutionary information from today's leading experts. This hour we'll examine evolving into 5D. There's a lot of buzz in spiritual circles about 5D. Most of us know 3D is three-dimensional reality, while 4D adds the element of time. But what is 5D? How does 5D impact us? Is entering it inevitable or a personal choice? Can everyone perceive it or only a chosen few? What does 5D have that 3D and 4D do not? With us this hour to explore the mysteries of 5D is Maureen Germain. Maureen is the author of 6 books, including Waking Up in 5D. Her books have been translated into 12 languages. She's also a composer and voice of guided meditations. Maureen has over 25 years of experience in mystical and sacred traditions. Known as the practical mystic, she is taught in 24 countries and is a teacher and facilitator of spiritual knowledge for contemporary life. Maureen is the founder of Germain Mystery School and the Akashic Records Guides. Her website, stgermainmysteryschool.com. Maureen, thanks so much for joining us on Mission Evolution.
My pleasure. It's such a treat to be on with you and all the wonderful experiences you offer.
Oh, thank you. It's just wonderful to have you here. I'm glad you took the time. So, Maureen, where were you trained in the sacred mystical traditions?
I studied with the Casey material initially as a teenager, and then became involved in various spiritual organizations that had teachings, including the teachings of the Ascended Masters and the teachings of the metaphysical community. And largely, my information has come through meditation of the practices that I had learned. Like, for example, I learned the Merkaba, and through my meditation work in that practice, I was able to download a lot more information.
Do you feel like what you're bringing through is like what they would call channeled material?
I think so, yes. Initially, this information came through my guides, but I didn't identify who was channeling. So I didn't call it channeling at that time. I do channel Ascended Masters now, but I still get intuitive, direct information from source that is very powerful, very useful, and very aligned with what we're doing spiritually.
Are there some checks and balances from the way you've trained so that you can tell who you're talking to?
There are, but primarily I get direct downloads from source, and I verify that by asking. I have developed a technique to check in with your higher self, and this is used around the world. I have lots of feedback from individuals for the last 20 years that would give us that validation. It's not clinical, but it most certainly is proof from experiential numbers. So the use of the higher self and the proof is a lot in the actual results. So people call me or write me and tell me of their experiences and how the higher self gave them information when they acted on it, and sometimes when they didn't, so that they could prove to themselves that when they didn't follow the guidance that came in, how it would play out.
So is each person dealing with their personal higher self when you're doing this?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So there's a very simple technique that I teach, and it's very logical, very, very precise and step-by-step, 3 main protocols that are part of a 45-day practice. And after that, a person can rely on their higher self connection.
Very nice. Very nice. So, would you please define 5D as we'll be working with it today?
Okay, so first I want to jump in and say that I do not hold the same view that science holds with regard to 4D. I do not believe time is uh, a dimension. I believe time is a construct, and that's what my guides have told me. And as a construct, it can be manipulated. So I see 4D as a place of emotional expansion. And when we're in this high emotional state, either high joy or grief, we tend to slide into the fourth dimension because things move faster, there's more intensity, and many people share that they have had highly intuitive experiences when they're in big grief or other kinds of high emotional states. And it's because you're closer to fifth dimension. 5D, in the simple terms, is the equivalent of what the traditions teach us is heaven. So it's a place where you have the choices of this life, but you don't consider the choice that would be harmful or hurtful. So, what does that mean? It means that if I were to say something about a particular way of dressing or a particular color, um, I might make a comment and or think a comment, oh, pink looks terrible on that person. But instead of saying that, I might find myself saying something very positive, like, yesterday when you wore that blue turquoise, you looked fabulous. And it doesn't say that the pink is bad. It just, you don't notice that the pink is bad. You just remember the good. So we still have lots of choice in 5D. A lot of people think that there's not free will, but we're actually moving from a place where the negative side or the dark side doesn't occur to us. So it doesn't exist in 5D. Now, there can be polarity in some 5D figures, but that's not what's happening here on Earth. So when we move into 5D, we're in this great place of joy. And I contend that everyone has moved into 5D and back again many times. It's not like getting a driver's license.
So it's kind of a you slide in and slide out sort of thing.
Like a sine wave. And it's a little bit like a teenager when they do something very mature, then they usually follow it with something stupid. And so we know that we're grappling with a certain way of being. And there are some things that we learn right away, certain word choices that we can adopt so we can be proactive. And that helps us stay in 5D.
Maureen, do you believe that now is a time in history where our being able to access and move into 5D is more available than it has maybe in the past?
Most certainly, because we're at the end of the Kali Yuga. We are moving to the era where all of us are going to be in this place of 5D. It also means if we're 5D, it means we've imbued our higher self or our perfected self that's connected to source into our physical body. So we're going to literally be walking around as ascended masters. So the timing now is very critical because our spirituality has not caught up with our technology, and it's time. So there's a push in that regard.
You mentioned we're moving into an era. I can't remember the word you used.
Kali Yuga.
Yes, what is that?
The Kali Yuga is a 26,000 age that allows us to track the time. And there's a lot of different types of calendars, religious calendars, spiritual calendars, and the Gregorian calendar, the Julian calendar. You could go back far enough, you would find alignment in all the calendars and the stars because the astronomers and the calendar makers were working together. Today, that's not so much found. However, it is believed generally that we're either at the cusp of the Kali Yuga or that we've already crossed into the great age of Aquarius. In either case, we are about ready to drop a lot of negativity. And being proactive about your choices is how you get into 5D and stay there.
So is it a personal choice though? You can either, the energy is there to support it, but if you want to remain where you are and bury your head in the sand, is that still a choice, or are you going to be drug along kicking and screaming?
That's a really good question. Recently, my guides have been saying that everybody's becoming 5D whether they're ready or not. So in some vantage points, it's probably not likely if you're spiritually inclined at all. Those who are, I'll use the word, expressing a certain way in the reality, and they're on what I will call the dark side, those people could choose, because we're still in a free will zone, to crash and burn, we shall say. And that would be their choice. But they're going to be given plenty of opportunity to make it right.
Do you think that because we're in this Kali Yuga time, that instead of being able to go along with business as usual in a lower frequency state, that then there is an inevitable crash and burn because it's not being supported?
My guides have been telling me for the last 20 years that there's no crash and burn for those who are moving proactively towards their own evolution. Just like your show's name, we're all evolving. You would have to resist evolving. And that's pretty hard to do with everyone else around you evolving. It's like the water in the harbor goes up, so do all the ships.
It's pretty interesting times that we're in. Isn't there a lot of pressure being brought to bear because of the raise in frequency, if you will? Pressure on the old ways.
Well, pressure is only because of resistance. When we let go and we allow, then there is no pressure. So yes, there is a lot of pressure for those times we're resisting. And I'll be the first one to say, yeah, I've been in resistance on occasion, and something could be right in front of me and I'm still resisting it. So I think it's a human nature to seek that which is familiar, because when we are missing our connection with source, because we all came from the source, we feel lonely. Our prime directive was to improve or increase the database or the knowledge experiences. So when we resist, we're seeking that which is familiar, which would be like seeking source or seeking God. It's a very subtle understanding, but it's very true. And once we realize, that we're already connected to source and we don't have to resist change, that change is always good, then it allows us to grow with whatever is put in front of us.
We're almost out of time in this segment, but you've spoken of the dark and the light. What do you mean by that?
Well, I try to treat this subject lightly because I feel we're on the edge of a new era where we don't have polarity. But I think of light and dark as the polarity of forces that help us or hinder us from choosing our highest and best choice.
Okay, so if you think about dark and light, just in photography even, if you don't have the black and the white, you don't have a picture. Okay, so does it relate that way or not?
In our perspective, you are correct that without the dark, there is no light. But at the same time, we are learning a new way to construct on a palette or on a painting without the dark.
Okay, so there's no contrast. That's pretty interesting. I'm trying to wrap my head around it.
Well, think about some of the pictures you've seen that have lots of light, and there is no darkness in them.
Okay, I haven't ever seen a picture like that, because without the shadow, there's no forms.
Well, we'll have to look into that.
Yes, we will. We will. On the other side of a break, Maureen and I will return shortly, so don't go away. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org. Are you interested in evolving with the times and becoming all you can be? Don't you wish there was one place to find the latest information to help guide you through the process? I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, host of Mission Evolution Radio TV. Join me on my mission to find the latest evolutionary knowledge and tools. The guests on Mission Evolution are leading experts in a wide variety of divergent topics, including allopathic, holistic, and integrative medicine, epigenetics, enlightenment, quantum physics, meditative practices, environmental issues, spiritual evolution, trauma healing, and so much more. Mission Evolution Radio TV is aired worldwide through the X-Zone Broadcast Network, X-Zone TV Channel 32 on Simul TV. You can enjoy our archives of radio or TV shows with our compliments at www.missionevolution.org. Come see the amazing lineup of guests and topics. With more than 200 episodes to choose from, you're sure to find what you're looking for. Visit www.missionevolution.org. Hello again. This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. With us this hour discussing 5D and beyond is Maureen J. St. Germain. Her website, stgermainmysteryschool.com. Maureen, we were getting into dark and light, and I think it's a very confusing topic. I was bringing up the fact that if you're taking photograph or even looking in the world, if you don't have both dark and light, you have no contrast, ergo you have no image. Is it more a question of balance than a totally elimination of one or the other?
I think you're onto something, that balance is going to be a contributing factor. But it is also true that from our 3D perspective, we are unable to perceptually visualize something that we've never understood. So just like a person who's only had rice and grains for their meals wouldn't have a comprehension of ice cream, what we're looking at is a game changer, a literal shift of the rules, a literal shift of the way we think, a literal shift of the way we operate. And we're going to keep creativity, we're going to keep free will, but the dark side will drop off in terms of behaviors, in terms of energy and emotion, and we will land with a place of contentment, but also curiosity. Sometimes when we're content, we don't act. We just want to lay around and enjoy the contentment. But the curiosity will drive us to explore and more experiences without man's inhumanity to man.
That would be a blessing for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So how does entering 5D, as we're doing, and I assume it's like when the sun rises, I mean, before the sun comes up at dawn, you can't really tell where dawn begins. It's this slow progression. Is that kind of where we are, is in this slow progression where there's no real dividing line between 4D and 5D?
Yes, but only in the experience of the moment. There certainly is a dividing line, because in 5D, the absence of polarity is pretty obvious when you examine it in hindsight. It isn't always easy to notice, because when you're in it, you're in this place of expansion and connection. So, I meet a stranger and I intuitively know what she needs to hear, so I speak it. I go into a room and I notice that there's a problem with an electrical outlet, and then I'll just say, somebody needs to look into that. So what happens is, in an individual, this sliding into 5D is much like the sunrise, as you have described, or sunset. There's no dividing line. But at the same time, there's a very clear line of awareness that when you've slid back from 5D into the polarity experience, you notice when the postal clerk is in a bad mood and pushes your buttons, or when somebody says something that upsets you, or you find yourself judging, well, that wasn't the caliber I'm used to, that wasn't the way I like things to be. We're all moving to that place of stepping out of judgment on practically everything, but we'll have perception and we'll have preferences, but we won't have judgment in the same way we do now. And that's hard to comprehend if you've always thought this way. That's why prejudice is so hard to break, because if you've always thought this way and that's how your parents talked and that's how you learned to think, it wouldn't occur to you to think in a different way until you get exposed to education that allows you to understand, oh, I can choose differently.
So you're saying that the moving into 5D is like that education. Once you see the other options, you tend to move more towards the 5D versus being back towards the 4D.
And 5D can creep up on you. If you're around somebody who is very 5D, he or she will raise the vibe, just like that example of the tide rising in the harbor.
So what's what does synchronicity, how does it play out in 5D?
Synchronicity is when we make that connection in our mind with something that we had thought about earlier. And this word was created to help define the random experiences that validate something that we had already thought about or experienced. I think synchronicity is a way of getting validation, just like goosebumps are a way of getting validation from your guidance to help you know that you are on the trajectory that you are choosing that takes you closer and closer to your ascension.
So if you set your intention, let's talk about intention a little bit. If you set your intention to cooperate with the process of moving into 5D, do you start seeing more synchronicities to guide you there?
Yes, you do. And one of the ways I set my intention is I'm asking for a day of heaven on earth for me and everyone I come in contact with. That creates a vibe of heaven on earth, of the equivalent of 5D, and it raises the vibe of people around me. So even if that bank teller has had a rough client before me, she is completely recovered when she's standing in front of me.
Interesting. And there's no instrumentation or any way that we can measure this level of frequency. Is that correct?
It's very interesting that you ask that. I have had frequency measurements done on the blends that were brought forward to go with my work. And these blends were channeled by Mary Magdalene, by one of my staff members, and they were tested both for their ability to allow the DNA to return to homeostasis faster, and they were also tested for blood microscopy, and then they were also tested for the energetic imprint that can be measured on Kirlian photography. And so those things can be measured, but the behavior, I don't know a way of measuring, but there may be one that you know about.
No, I'm clueless. So the what you were talking about, the remedies, are those homeopathic? Are they essential oils? What are you working with there that you're
They're
measuring?
essential oils, and they come in a little bottle, and they carry a certain vibrational frequency, and they change our vibe. So, for example, Crystal Source is a blend that moves us from feeling like we don't belong into a connection to our own divine blueprint, which helps us recognize who we really are. And then, of course, the belonging is a conclusion of that. There's 24 blends, and they each address an emotional wound that allows the person to move from where they're at in, I'll call it dysfunction, to a place that's proactive. And what's very interesting is we have many people who use these blends and have a full set and select randomly every day. And I have clients who are therapists themselves, and they decided to start using them first thing in the morning, which is what I recommended. And to do the guided meditation that goes with it, I have a little card that recommends a certain statement. And one of the gentlemen who runs, is the supervisor to a big group of therapists, said to me that most of the time he opens a bottle and uses the protocol of inhaling it to bring it into the limbic system, that it sets the tone for the day and it makes it very easy to have a good day. And he said, but sometimes he's busy and he forgets. And then he doesn't do it till after lunch. And he said, he can really tell the difference energetically because the dramas are like this instead of like this.
What kind of therapists are you talking about here?
MSWs.
What's that? I'm sorry.
That's someone who is certified as they're not a medical doctor, but they're a social worker therapist.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Master
And
of
that,
Social Work. That's MSW. Sorry, I was not being
okay,
clear.
that's okay. No problem. No problem. So, what's one of the main signs that people can start to recognize when they're going back and forth between 4D and 5D? How can you tell when you're dancing back and forth and when you're in one or when you're in the other?
I like the word dancing. And it is a little bit of a dance. I think one of the number one ways is people say things to you that you might normally be taken aback, but you don't feel it. You just kind of smile sweetly and take the highest version of whatever that is. And I'll give you an example. One time, my stepsister, who had a way with words, said something about me being the ice queen. And that's because she couldn't get a rise out of me. And I just smiled sweetly. And I remember thinking, oh, she must remember that I was a queen in Egypt. And, later in the day, when you're laying in bed and you're thinking about your day, you're thinking, oh, maybe she was trying to insult me, but I didn't hear it. So those kinds of things happen as a result of having the 5D experience, and then in hindsight noticing, oh yeah, I didn't react. I didn't get mad. I used to get mad over stuff like that, for example.
So is that a matter of being identified with your damage versus identified with your higher self?
I'm not sure what you mean by damaged.
Well, if we're in 4D and we have a lot of issues that get triggered by something someone might say, that sounds like what you're describing. Okay. But if we're in more in alignment with our higher self and less in alignment with our damaged, ergo our triggers, we're less likely to be volatile about it.
That's true. That's very true. But what I'm suggesting is that you get to be in that state without having done the work. In other words, you can just land there.
There's a magic pill.
Yes, there is a magic pill. One of them is to say, I'm having a day of heaven on earth. Another one is to say, before you go to bed, I'm waking up in 5D. And what it does is it sets the tone. It sets the field so that you're moving in an energy field that is a high vibe that you can harmonize with and stay there. It's pretty amazing, really, when you think about it.
Sounds to me like you're talking about working with your intent. You intend to be there, and then you are.
Yes, this is most certainly true. I don't see an I am statement as intent. I see it as a present action. So
Okay.
I am waking up in 5D already tells the universe this is how it is. When we intend, it's very close to the same thing because it's about what we expect or what we hold to happen. But these statements of choice, I am happy to meet my child instead of I have to, for example, gives us the tipping point that carries us over to where we want to be. So that's why knowing about 5D, the education, and beginning to understand the concepts, we get to choose proactively. And the idea that everybody's going to go there anyway, yeah, you could sit around and, be a jerk and make people uncomfortable, but it holds you back on the things that you want because you're also telling the universe there's not enough. And I'm always amazed at how we set the stage to tell the universe there is not enough. And that's when we tell a lie or a white lie or a fib, when we think that we have to get the best possible deal at the car dealership and try and get the price down even more than what they're supposed to be doing. It's like those kinds of things. So the 5D vibe is that I want a situation to be good for you, but I want it to be good for me as well. And
So focusing on the
available.
win-win.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Okay. So we're again not out of time in this segment, but how can you tell the difference between genuinely moving into 5D and going into denial?
Good question. So do you want me to tell that now or after the break?
Probably we're going to have to pick it up after the break because we don't have enough time to get into it. But after the break, let's
Okay.
get into that. What's the difference between actually reaching this state and going into denial that you're not there? So we will take up on that. Maureen and I will be back to continue our discussion. So you stay right there. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org.
So I was watching the X Zone TV channel last night when I was abducted by aliens, and they kept repeating to me over and over again, simultv.com, simultv.com.
What's simultv.com?
That's what I asked them. They had it written on the side of their UFO.
How do you spell that?
UFO.
No, I mean simultv.com.
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 Right. simultv.com.
Interesting that you were abducted by aliens in a simultv.com UFO last night.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Now that you mention it, I remember now last night I was awakened from a deep sleep. My great-grandmother was standing there. She said she'd come from the hereafter to tell me about simultv.com. She even spelled it out for me.
simultv.com, sonny boy.
simultv.com.
simultv.com, sonny boy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Guys, you'll never guess what my psychic guru just told me.
simultv.com.
Exactly. Are you guys psychic too?
Of course.
We all know about simultv.com. simultv.com.
Hi there. This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. Our guest this hour is Maureen J. St. Germain. Her website, stgermainmysteryschool.com. Maureen, as promised, we were going to go into how a person can tell the difference, whether they're actually in the state where they can reach 5D or they're in denial of the places that they are not in the state.
Okay. So the first thing that happens is things don't work the way you expected. So if you're in denial, it's because you're in denial and you're trying to make something happen, but you're really not in that place of unconditional love and non-judgment. Second way, if you get past that and you still don't see it, is somebody will tell you. And that's really hard when somebody tells you you're in denial about XYZ. And if someone says that to you and you argue with them, that means you're holding on to your whatever it is, your belief, your idea, without being open to the possibility that there's another way or another vantage point. A lot of times people, when they're confronted by their family or friends, they'll go into explanation after explanation. And the fact is, in 5D, you feel so much love for yourself from Source that you don't need to explain yourself to anybody else because you really don't care whether everybody approves of you or not.
Interesting. So that's the old adage, what you think about me is none of my business.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
it really helps to have that phrase in your head.
So this is a little bit of a left turn, and it may or may not be something you can tell me, but how does the 5D state relate to astrology and the planet Chiron?
Well, I am not an astrologer. I'm an amateur observer of astrology. So I know that Chiron is the wounded healer. And perhaps you are alluding to something along that line. What's interesting is in 5D, we won't be using astrology the way we use it today.
It seems to me like all, like you mentioned at the beginning, that all of our calendars at one time were based on the movement of the planets in the universe, basically, and our relationship therein. And it's not anymore. So I'm wondering
That's
if
true.
astrology will apply, but not in the way that we've been using it.
It's well said. And that's exactly the answer I would have given you. Astrology might apply in terms of the planetary movements, but it won't apply in the way we've interpreted it today. Exactly. And I am a practitioner of the belief that we can alter the astrology. So the classic thing that a lot of people know or hear about, even if they don't follow astrology, is a Mercury retrograde, where snafus occur, people are late, equipment breaks down. And I know from experience that I can step out of that matrix and operate as if that slowdown is not impacting me in my world. And I have wonderful examples in two different trips, one coming from the Midwest to Hawaii. My plane was an hour late taking off, and my connection in LA was on time, so I missed that connection. Took a later flight, but still arrived at my final destination an hour early. And that's because I was able to get on a feeder flight that I wasn't booked on. On the return, at a different time, when it was a Mercury retrograde, we sat on the tarmac in Kona for an hour, and I managed to arrive at my final destination also an hour early. And the reason on that case was because I was actually able to catch an earlier flight on my final flight, the final connection, that was running late, that I would never have been able to catch if I was even on my regular flight.
Interesting. So it sounds like maybe the influences of these things are there, but rather it's how we relate to them and how we view them that makes the difference in how they affect our lives.
I think it's a matter of opting out, and that opting out gives us the free will to participate and be in a place of connection without being ruled by it. You have to
What are you
know about
opting
it.
out? What are you opting out
Exactly.
of? Are you opting out of the common denominator belief of what these things mean versus working with the energy that's present?
Okay, so I believe the energy is present. And I believe that we are literally opting out or creating a bubble of exception for ourselves. As far as the belief goes, whether people believe in astrology or not, it is my belief that they're affected by it. So, when a person says they're late and they don't know why, and I'm looking at the calendar and I know it's a Mercury retrograde, I'm even more supportive and allowing than even in normal times. And I'll just say something, oh, these things happen at this time of year or something like that, if they don't follow astrology. There's no need to force the knowledge on someone. But in case of astrology, the understanding of the vibes that come into effect. And I like to think of it as like a game board. When we play a game of Monopoly, we each get a certain amount of money and we roll the dice and we see where we land. We buy the property that we can and we develop a relationship in the game. And I look at astrology the same way and say that it's just a template that got the game going. It isn't obligatory. But if you don't know about it, it's like a GPS. If you don't follow your GPS and you go to a place on a road trip where the bridge is out, you don't know the bridge is out because you didn't look at a GPS. There wasn't any advance notice. So the astrology gives you that GPS to decide to take a different route.
Okay. So you mentioned earlier that you don't view 5D and 4D like the scientific view of adding the element of time. Does 5D contain the element of time?
No, it has the element of sequence, but it does not have the element of time. And the way I explain it to myself and to others is when we're writing a letter and we get up from the computer to do something, get a cup of coffee or whatever, and then we come back, the computer doesn't know that I was gone 5 minutes or 20 minutes. It doesn't do anything while I'm waiting. It just has the letter there, and I come back to it as if no time had occurred. So there's sequence, but not time. Time, it divides our life into segments that we collectively have agreed to. But again, with enough spiritual power, you can opt out of time. And we have plenty of examples of that, not just with me, but with other people as well. There's a story in one of my books about Greg Braden compressing time and getting across the desert in I'd say 2 or 3 hours, where normally it takes 5 to cross this particular location. And when it happened to me and I was arriving in the hotel, the general manager of the bus company said to me, nobody except Greg Braden has ever done that before. Somehow move through time. And what happened on the bus is everybody fell asleep and no one was watching the time. And somehow we managed to cross that distance in less time. And I'm willing to bet that there are many of our listeners who have had that similar experience, because I have heard stories from people that I work with that'll say, they had a 5-hour drive ahead of them. They went into a zone. They're listening to music they like. They were thinking happy thoughts. They didn't even think about what they were thinking about. They were just in a good place. And they arrived 2 hours early.
So we hear a lot about timelines and timeline jumps. How does that relate here?
The Lords of Time came through me a number of years ago. And I was not expecting that. I didn't even know there was such a being or group of beings. And when they came in with a big thump. They announced with great intensity, we are the Lords of Time. So it was pretty hard for me to say, that's bogus. I'm making this stuff up. Because I'm sure that people who are learning this work are wondering themselves, some days, did I make that up? But the Lords of Time have explained that there are ways to loop time, to compress time, and to expand time. And timeline jumps would be similar, same timeline, and just to jump further ahead and skip over certain things. And there's also the merging of timelines. Every time we make a choice, we create a divergent timeline. So when you decide what college to go to, and you're looking at 2, when you finally make the decision and you straighten out that one line, this other line is sort of there and it slowly fades and disintegrates. If, however, you're in this timeline and you think to yourself, I made the wrong decision. I need to be in that other school. Then this becomes enlivened, and then this one starts to shrivel and fade as they transfer and move to the new location.
It's enough to bend your mind when you try to wrap it around it, isn't it?
Well, and here's the thing. The Ascended Master Sanat Kumara said to me a number of years ago, said to a group, the game is over, referring to 3D as a game. He then went on to say, the game will end when there are no more players. And then he finished with, will you be the first to leave or the last? And what's so profound about this is when we stay polarized, when we, enjoy our little me, I'll call it, we hold up the results that we want.
So if right now, I assume that means that all of us are dancing back and forth between 3D, 4D, 5D.
Right.
But if what the channel material you said is the game will be over when there's no more players, is that to say that eventually 3D won't exist? It won't be an option to drift back into.
I agree with that statement. I think that's true. But, think of it another way. You won't want it. When a person was a child, maybe they thought French fries at McDonald's were the latest thing, the best thing. And it would be the great way to have a hamburger and fries for dinner. But as an adult, if you want to impress someone, you don't take them to McDonald's. You take them to a nice restaurant. So your tastes, your preferences change. And because they change, the choices that you're looking at are more elevated. When you're a 5 or 6 year old and ask, do you want to go to this fancy restaurant for dinner, or do you want to have McDonald's? You're going to say McDonald's. You could care less about the fancy restaurant. But once you know about the fancy restaurant and you're an adult and your taste buds have developed, it sounds pretty good.
So you're saying that, if I'm understanding you, that we will lose our taste for 3D, ergo it will cease to exist?
That's really well said. I may copy you on that one.
It's all yours.
Lose our taste for 3D, and it's absolutely true. And that's exactly what happens. It's not like it's a bad choice. It's because the minute we would label it bad, then of course we would be locked back down into 3D because we would have to choose the good. But if we're not attracted to it, we lost our taste for it, it doesn't exist for us anymore.
It's kind of like an addiction.
In a way, it is, but in the positive way, that you long for that connection and that feeling of joy. And sometimes we're in a place where we really want the joy, but we can't get it because we're so tied up in our loss or our grief or our sadness. And one of the things that my guides told me to do was to go watch sunsets. And so I started watching sunsets every day, and I slowly lifted out of my depression. However, years later, there was a scientific study that said that people who watch sunsets will move out of their depression faster. And why? Scientists concluded because the subconscious knows there's another one tomorrow.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. I would have guessed it had something to do with the changing of light and the pineal and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, probably there is that too, but we haven't got a science that's studying that one.
Well, I'm hoping science will catch up with all this and vice versa in the not too distant future, so it can start to slide into everybody's reality.
I like it.
It is that magic moment again. We're going to have to take another station break. Maureen and I will be back to continue to explore spiritual evolution. So don't go away. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org. Do you have a product or service you'd like to promote to a worldwide audience? Imagine your product featured on Mission Evolution Radio TV. If you're interested in showcasing your work, Mission Evolution is broadcast to the X Zone TV Channel 32 Simul TV, on the X Zone Broadcast Network, YouTube, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Audible, and many other audio and social media platforms. Our professional studios can produce and broadcast your custom high-quality ad. It will be permanently embedded in each episode and featured in the archives for years to come. Together, we can make it happen. Contact us at info@missionevolution.org for more details. Spaces are limited, so don't miss out on this great opportunity. Email info@missionevolution.org today. Welcome back. This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. Our guest this hour is Maureen J. St. Germain. Her website, stgermainmysteryschool.com. Maureen, I'd like to shift gears a little bit and talk about some of the work that you do with help me with the pronunciation, the Merkaba.
Mm-hmm. The Merkaba is a fifth dimensional vehicle that helps you be more fifth dimensional. So it's a little bit like putting on the uniform of a 5D'er, and that allows you to think and act in a more evolved way, again, without having done all the spiritual processes that would normally be expected to get to that place.
Let's back up a little bit. I'm envisioning a sports car here. So would you define the Merkaba for us, please?
That's a really good explanation, because I do use a car as an explanation for the Merkaba. So let's pick a Ferrari, shall we? And so in the Merkaba, you actually learn, in the actual guided meditation called the Merkaba, you learn the tools of allowing your body to access a field that already exists around you. Now, it's based on some of the geometry that's behind me. And a star tetrahedron like this is commonly referred to as the Merkaba, but it's technically not a Merkaba till you start it spinning in a certain way that goes in both directions. And it's a little bit complicated to learn, but takes 5 minutes to do. And what it does is changes the reality for you so that you're thinking in a way that's more evolved than you would in your everyday life.
So is it like sacred geometry and added with motion?
Yes, it's entirely built on sacred geometry. And that's the justification to help people understand this field exists around all of us. And we have all of the 5 platonic solids around us. We have the cube, we have the tetrahedron. And what the Merkaba does for us is activates a field that produces an energetic connection to our higher dimensional selves and connects us with the world around us. So with an activated Merkaba, you're actually more capable of understanding what's really going on. So someone says something and maybe they mean something different than what they've actually said. You somehow begin to understand, oh, they meant this. And it also causes you to have abilities that you didn't have before. So your intuition or your understanding of the world around you expands in a way. The best way I know how to explain it is when somebody says to you, how did you know that? And the person asked that, who has been asked that question, says, I don't know.
So
And
what you're saying, it sounds almost like the Merkaba field allows you to connect better with the unified field and therefore with what's going on with other people.
Exactly so. Exactly so. And it also helps you connect with your higher expression. I'll give you an example. If you have an offspring that treats you badly and they're an adult, they certainly grew up in a nice household, you were good to them, all the good stuff, and you contemplate, well, why are they behaving this way, or when are they going to start to appreciate all I've done for them? You might actually get an answer. And it's happened a couple of times with people I've worked with, and it happened to me as well. And when I was told about one of my sons who was acting out, I burst out laughing when they said when he's 28, because I was thinking, he's like 24 now. I'm thinking like tomorrow would be good. I just gave him everything I have in savings and, blah, blah, blah. And what's funny is when I burst out laughing, I realized that I had created a barrier of some small expectation that he would at least acknowledge me. And I was in a tough spot. I'd just gotten fired from a day job, and so I didn't have a lot of backup behind me. So I wasn't as confident in my decision of yesterday as I could have been. And by recognizing my bias, that I had some expectation at some point that he would appreciate me, I was holding him over that. I was holding it over him. So he had a fence to jump over. And once I dropped it and said, fine, doesn't matter, I don't care, I didn't have to wait till he was 28.
That's amazing. I'd like to back up a little bit. I don't think we've been real clear on exactly what the Merkaba is, and how one activates it or uses it in their personal life.
Okay. So the Merkaba is an energetic field that looks like this shape. And so it's 2 tetrahedrons that are equally nested. So here's a tetrahedron, and that's 3 sides and a base of a pyramid. And there's 2 of them that are equally nested. Kind of hard to see, but if I turn it, you can see it a little bit. And I also have one in my background here that's not showing. Camera must have been moved. Let me just grab it. This normally is sitting behind me, and it is, but it's not in a place that I could move it without worrying I would crash the stand. So this field is around the physical body, and there is an axis point between the top and the bottom, and the human person has a very specific way of activating it, which creates a spin. Now the spin kinds of energy, and because of that, it is taught in an environment where there's a teacher and demos and pictures and so on. Once you learn it, the actual meditation only takes 5 minutes to do.
So
And
I'm sorry, is this what you're speaking about is the auric field or the toroidal field that's around the body, and you're learning to use it in a specific way, to activate it in a specific way?
well, it's like the toroidal field, but it is not the toroidal field. So the toroidal field is the field around the I have all these things that demonstrate all this. The toroidal field is like the shape of an apple core. So the shape is around the body and moves up through the pranic tube and around. This is another field that exists around the body. And this particular geometry, sacred geometry as we refer to it, allows us to elevate our consciousness to a higher plane of existence.
So is this something that people have used over the ages, the mystics and whatnot, to evolve into that higher state of consciousness to access the information?
That's right. And even the mystics and the Hebrew tradition were aware of the Merkaba, and a lot of information was taught in the esoteric schools, not in the regular trainings. This particular version that I teach is the 17 breath Merkaba, and then I also teach a 5D Merkaba that's an evolutionary step above that, and then I have an 8D Merkaba above that. So these are activations that we acquire, and then we do them every day until they become permanent. Once they become permanent, you might still want to do it, or you might be okay not doing it.
By permanent, do you mean perpetual motion then?
Say it again.
By permanent, do you mean perpetual motion?
Yes, it's permanent because you're breathing and you're alive. So you're filling it with your life force by breathing. It dissolves if you were to die because you're not breathing. You're using your breath to activate it. So yes, it becomes permanent. I don't know whether I'd call it perpetual motion unless you want to call breathing perpetual motion.
Well, it is till you die, right?
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Maureen, we're about in the time of the show, and I have to ask you, what is your mission?
My mission is to help people be the most evolved they can be. And it is my deep pleasure to share a lot of information that I have learned from my own guides and how it complements everyday life. That's why they call me the practical mystic, because I'm interested in finding practical ways to use a spiritual knowledge.
And do you think that through what you're teaching and what you're doing, that you can help other people to learn to contact their personal information, their personal higher self, their personal guides?
That's true. That's exactly what I do. And because I have an annual program, that's one of our number one missions, is to help everyone get their higher self connection going and relying upon it. And then, of course, the joke is don't rely on any spiritual teacher. Ask your higher self. And I think it's a funny joke because I consider myself a spiritual teacher, and I'm telling you, don't listen to me, listen to your higher self. Hopefully your higher self will tell you, listen to Maureen. But
yes. So how long have you been teaching these classes?
Since 1994.
I thought you've been at it a while.
Yeah, I have been at it a while.
Do you
I
find
kept my corporate job for about 10 years and taught on weekends only.
wow.
Yeah, I didn't know it was my full-time work until I went to the altar and said, okay, I'm ready to give up my corporate work, because I loved working in the corporate world. I was very happy.
Do you find, as you've watched it over the years, that more people are drawn to this kind of work now than were when you first began, or the other way around?
No, I think more people are interested in this across the board. And it's very exciting because we have this opportunity to really be part of the transformation of the world we live in today.
And that's what we're all about, isn't it? That mission
Yeah.
evolution thing. So, what's your vision of 5D moving forward? What we've kind of danced around it all, but here
Mhm.
we are, 3D, 4D, 5D. What's your vision for all of us moving forward?
It's a place where we can say what we really think. It's a place where we can say what we feel. We can have compassion towards ourselves and others. We still want to play and experiment and discover and talk, but we won't have a need to be hurtful or hateful to one another. It won't, like you said before, we've lost our taste for that.
You spoke of working in corporate America. If as we're moving into 5D en masse, what's going to happen to the structures that we now heretofore have been working in, living in, relying on?
I like this question because it points to the whole idea, what will I do if I lose my job? And the answer is that I have been reassured by my guides that all of humanity is going to shift in a way that allows them to stay centered and in their joy, and that each opportunity for change will cause them to level up. And so, as certain industries die, other industries will move forward, people will find their way, and they may even find their happiness.
Hmm. I know that the most successful, there's a study done, some of the most successful people in our country went to Montessori school. And Montessori is all about letting the child be drawn to what they're drawn to. Do you see that as working, not the Montessori school, but that principle working in the future?
I did not know that fact, but I did send all four of my sons to Montessori schools. I think that we each come in with some gifts that we can build on. We come in with gifts that we have already mastered, and we use those resources and then the environment, including the astrology, to create in this world and to be who we are. But everyone has choice points, and the choice points are opportunities to go one way or another. There are also a lot of people that we're told in the Akashic Records who don't have a prerequisite or a predetermined mission other than to help others. And
Well,
so
Maureen, I'm sorry to
they go
cut you
where
off,
they're told.
but we are out of time.
Okay.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Our guest this hour has been Maureen J. St. Germain, author of 6 books, including Waking Up in 5D. Her website, stgermainmysteryschool.com. This has been Mission Evolution with Gwilda Wiyaka. For more information or to enjoy past archived episodes, visit www.missionevolution.org. And please join us next time as this mission continues, bringing resources and support to an evolving world.